Many of us are excited about the opportunities that advances in technology will offer to society, but as this conversation has already shown, with every disruptive technology, there are risks that demand mitigation. For example, automated decision-making systems and tools risk actually exacerbating the many existing inequities in our society, and that actually leads me to my first question. It's clear that investments in AI research and education have not been distributed equally across the nation's researchers and innovators. Now, racial and gender diversity in AI and computer science programs are severely lacking. And this lack of diversity among students gives rise to the corresponding lack of diversity in the workforce. And a lack of diversity in the workforce then contributes to the development of AI tools and approaches that either don't account for or actively perpetuate systemic bias and limits the breadth of ideas incorporated into AI innovation. So my question is for Dr. Venkata-Subramanian. As an educator, how can we ensure our AI and computer science students and workforce reflect the diversity of our nation?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. This is an issue that concerns me greatly, as you might imagine, as an educator. I see the students who come to me who are concerned about this, and more often than not, the students who are most concerned about these issues are students who truly reflect the broad diversity in this country, which is in one way a very good thing, but it also shows where the gaps in our ability to deliver STEM education effectively to our population is. I would say that in my experience, when students are able to see themselves in the work that they do, in the studies and the topics they study, they are more engaged with it, and they feel like technology, in this case, can speak to them. The students who come to speak to me about concerns around bias and responsibility in AI come to me because they have literally said, I finally see a place for myself in this tech ecosystem. One of the reasons why I spend a lot of time talking about concerns about bias and inequities in technology is because it is only by speaking out loud about those issues and pointing to the ways in which we can use technology to mitigate those issues that we can actually bring in a population that feels like they are now being heard and that their concerns are being heard. So I view these as part of the same story, that by spending time recognizing the inequities of AI, by spending time recognizing the need to govern our AI system to take account of these inequities, we are actually telling people, we welcome you in this technology-enabled world.
Thank you. Ms. Givens, I'd be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to ask the former Chief Intellectual Property Counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee a question about intellectual property. Now, AI is introducing novel questions about the extent of a creator's intellectual property rights, most notably in the world of copyright. Do you have any advice for those of us on the Judiciary Committee as we enter this new era of IP complexity?
I'm afraid I don't have a solution for you on this incredibly complex issue, but I do think it's an area where much attention is needed. There are photographers and designers and artists out there who understandably are deeply worried about the erosion of their industry and the role that they can play with the creation of generative AI, and also that their work is being used to train those tools. On the other hand, we have had a very long tradition of fair use principles and uses for the transformative works in the creative space. And so there has to be a healthy conversation around how we appreciate some of those concerns of creators without inhibiting what is in itself an expressive act, the creation of new and diverse and transformative works through these tools.
Thank you. To be continued. Dr. Matheny, large language models are rapidly improving, and generative AI can have many important and positive applications. However, as a former elections administrator, I want to share a specific concern that I have about the ease with which this technology could facilitate election disinformation campaigns. Now, generative AI could radically reduce the cost and time while increasing the impact of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. And not only could someone make it seem like one of us on the dais said something that we didn't say or endorsing something that we don't endorse, but also the ability of foreign actors to supercharge their efforts to interfere in our elections is absolutely clear. And referencing back to the Judiciary Committee, we know from our law enforcement officials that it is actually extremism, domestic extremism, and white supremacy that pose the largest national security threats to the United States. It's bad enough that Speaker McCarthy was willing to share with Tucker Carlson all the footage of January 6th, which is now being repackaged to make it seem like a whole different January 6th, 2021 took place than what is reality. And that's using actual footage. Imagine AI-generated video and the power that it can have in reshaping people's perspectives and attempts to redefine the truth. So, Doctor, in light of your testimony, how do you recommend that we prepare our elections infrastructure and political processes to address propaganda that is harder to detect?
Thanks for the question, Senator. For several years, RAND has had a project on something we call truth decay, which is the vulnerability of democracies to disinformation attacks and other attacks against norms of evidence used in policy debates. One concern that we've had for several years is that the application of AI to disinformation campaigns could, as you point out, radically reduce the costs and increase the scale and speed of text and speech potentially that's used in disinformation in ways that are very difficult to distinguish from human-generated forms of text and speech. I think one important area is in research on distinguishing generative model text and speech compared to ones that are authentic. So first, how can we watermark the products of generative AI systems in ways that we can distinguish them? And second, for those systems that have not used watermarking, can we find other signatures that allow digital forensics to be able to distinguish that which is disinformation from that which is legitimate?
Also to be continued. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator,